for taking the time to come and invest in some ideas to explore the relationship with your daughter. I don't think that dads gather very often to talk about their daughters, and so this is a unique opportunity, and I want it to feel useful and interesting for you, and my goal would be that you would walk away with one idea about how to connect or one new understanding of your daughter. I just want to make it clear that I'm not a dad. I know nothing about being a dad, but I had an extraordinary dad, and I am a daughter. And I bring that truth. I also have 2 daughters and a son, and I'm married to their dad, and I understand what their relationship and dynamic looks like, and so I bring that truth. But why I'm really here is that I have spent 35 years talking to girls. I created a class 31 years ago called Heart to Heart for girls, and we talk about puberty and sex. We have 18,000 people go through that class a year. We do it up and down the West Coast, down in San Francisco and here. So I spend an enormous amount of time talking about the developmental space of girls. So while I don't know what it's like to stand in your shoes, I think I know a lot about girls. And I've had a chance to do this talk over many years to hundreds of dads, and I think I've had a chance to at least hear what some dads are thinking, worried about, whatever, and I want an opportunity for you to at least have a chance to explore authentically kind of what would be interesting about your relationship with your girl, what makes it challenging, what makes it interesting, what makes it seem engaging, and perhaps giving you a bit more courage about how to engage with that idea. I think sometimes for dads, you have been kind of assuming that the truth about your girls is, all we have sometimes is what's in front of us. But when I was the age of many of your girls are today, the world really was different for girls. In 1974, there were only 2 Ivy League schools that had full admission for girls. You couldn't run and register as a girl or a woman in the Boston Marathon. This is pre-Title IX. You couldn't get a scholarship as an athlete in college. 60% of girls didn't even graduate from college, and that most of the majors for girls were typical women professions when I was the age of your girls. When I was born, only 2 states allowed a woman on a jury. And women were required to wear a dress in court. There were no pants allowed for a woman. When I was the age of your girls, it required a man, a father or a husband, to sign for a car, to get a credit card, or buy a house. So you can see that although your girls live at a time when they are really killing it in academics and in athletics. The world has really only been a lifetime, one single person's lifetime, very different from that. When I was in high school, 1 in 30 girls played a high school sport. For your girls, the truth is that 1 in 3 play a high school sport. I'm the parent of a D1 athlete, fully scholarshiped daughter in athletics. I'm also the mother of a fully scholarshiped daughter in theater. I know what it's like to have women be both underrepresented and unrecognized, and to have the benefit of today where your girls are getting seen and heard and acknowledged more than ever. But I really want to make sure that we don't forget that that is not true around the world. And although I won't read all these statistics, I think you can just see the numbers here that, there are hundreds of millions of girls that are married by the age of 15, that have a huge exposure to sexually transmitted diseases, that are being failed in education and not allowed in classrooms. There are probably 250 million girls that don't have products for a period, so they are unable to go to school for an entire week out of every month. and there are no bathrooms in their school, and there's no safety for them. So I feel responsible to you and to all girls across the world to recognize with this single slide that it's not the same in the world as it is for your girls. At the same time, I want to acknowledge that it's not the same even across the United States, that it's also rosy and fantastic. In the world of girls in the United States, we have the highest rate of teenage pregnancy in all industrialized nations. We have a very strong sexually transmitted disease problem. We have depression problem. We have an eating disorder problem. So the world of girls' health is also interesting to explore here in the United States. It's not a perfect situation, and we have some work to do. I'm imagining for you, given the age of Forest Ridge parent, that you have middle school daughter or late elementary school daughter, early high school daughter, and that relationship has shifted over time between when your child was young and when your girl's young, and then this mysterious other person shows up, and you're kind of wondering, or at least exploring, how does that change my relationship? What does that look like now? And is there room for me as a dad in my daughter's life? And I just am here to explore how to connect with your daughter. And that to give you courage to examine the idea that she's looking for connection from you, even if you can't see or hear that idea or that leaning towards you, that I want to bring my full professional and huge exposure to your daughters and girls like your daughters to affirm the idea that the whole goal here is to connect. So what would that look like for your daughters? I kind of created this little presentation on 4 ideas to kind of explore the physical, emotional, social, and cognitive space of girls. And I've attached it to a developmental kind of task or goal for each of those spaces so that you can kind of think, well, if that's all true, what's the goal here? I've attached each of these ideas to a goal. And those are built on research and my experience so that you have an understanding of, what, if I were to take on one idea here, or if I think of what's the goal of this space, it helps me kind of, when I have an understanding of that, it helps me frame my words or know kind of what my goal is in communication. So let's just explore each of these ideas and kind of walk them through and see if we can kind of get an idea. And I'm so open for clarity or ask a question and kind of see where we're at. So let's start with the physical idea, the physical space of girls. I've attached that to the adolescent and childhood task of courage. I do that because I think sometimes we think we want our girls to be confident and have high self-esteem when it comes to their physical selves, but actually we all walk around with varying degrees of confidence, self-esteem around our physical selves. And in fact, it would be almost impossible to have high self-esteem about physical self all the time. I think it actually requires courage to show up even without any confidence or self-esteem physically. The famous dancer Twyla Tharp said, I have to show up with courage even if I don't think I can do it that day. And I think that's true for your girls. I think it's true for you. That showing up at a gym or showing up on a field or showing up in a physical space requires courage because, especially for your girls, they're being evaluated and seen and defined and judged on their physical selves. Because I teach girls puberty and sex, I have to start with the idea of puberty first because that's the inevitable passage of physical change for girls. Your girls are going to start puberty, will start puberty in elementary school. Many of your girls will finish puberty by the time they leave middle school, and the rest will finish up by early high school. Girls' puberty is a very short life experience. it's a 5 to 6 year thing where they go from being girl to grown up. That is very, very different than a boy's experience. For all of you and for your sons and for the boys in your life, they start puberty up to 2 years after girls. They carry on all the way through high school. Some boys are finished at the end of high school. Many are still growing into college. And many of the secondary sex characteristics of puberty, like beards and broad shoulders and chiseled faces of a boy, kind of keep on going into your 30s. So for boys' puberty, although the definition of puberty is when you stop growing, boys' puberty extends out over a longer period of time and less distinct. So not only are girls starting puberty earlier, they're finishing puberty earlier, and they're being defined as an adult physically. It's happening now, right in front of you. They'll grow 2 to 10 inches. They will gain 15 to 55 pounds in a very short amount of time. The average age of menstruation in the United States is 12 and a half. So you'll have a sexually reproductive girl in grade school, middle school. That's an interesting idea, especially given how our girls are seen, how they're seen by the world. Because one of the interesting things about girls' puberty is it takes you away from American ideal beauty. It makes you bigger. A healthy girl's body will have twice the amount of fat on their body when they're finished with puberty than when they started. That's healthy. They will have twice the amount of fat on their body than any boy who's finished with puberty. And in our world, the idea of what is fat or what is round or what is bigger is not admired in a girl, especially as we see them go from adorable little girl. We admire the little people, and then the bigger, rounder, fuller people are seen as less interesting, less beautiful. So part in our culture, and especially in white culture. So I think part of our understanding of what does that mean when our girls change, these 3 girls, these are twins and a girl, are the exact same age. So as you know, on a freshman football team, there could be a 100-pound weight difference between 2 guys on the freshman football team, right? For 2 girls, this space, the time of most difference, is 7th grade, right? 6th and 7th grade. So that idea that you have girls that look like this, shoulder distance apart, is the most difference is in middle school. And then that pretty much gets wrapped up. People are fully grown by often a sophomore year in high school for girls. That makes the most challenging place in the land of puberty for girls is the earliest developing girl, because she's out there in front, not only of all girls, but of all people in any classroom. In a co-ed classroom or in your neighborhood, the girl who's the earliest developing girl is in the most place of stress. And just to counteract, of course, the most place of stress for all boys is the latest developing boy, right? Because you're the smallest, and you're the smallest for forever. So as a sophomore, if you haven't started puberty as a boy, all girls are adult people. And half the guys in that high school are adult, and you're the only kid left, right? So those are just some interesting ideas to think about. The most searched Google question of parenting for a girl is my daughter what? Is my daughter beautiful?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. The most searched question of parenting for a boy is my son
Smart.
exactly? Is my son smart? So it tells you a little bit about this idea of physical and courage and what it means to show up as a girl in this very short amount of time of transition, and then how do we as grown-ups and as dads circle around this idea of how to support our daughters at a time when they might think it's hard going through puberty, people should know straight up it gets tough, and you're most looking forward to starting it and then ending it. I think part of this whole thing is I've got to wake up in a very short amount of time with a different idea of what I look like and how I'm seen. So in this study of 1,000 girls, the question is the stereotype true for girls, that they need to dress the right way, that they're kind and caring, that they please everyone, and popular girls are thin? you can see how the physical part, how am I seen by others, is sort of the dominant theme here of what I'm worried about, and kind of how my courage has to show up every day if I believe I'm being seen and evaluated and judged on these ideas. So, when we look at studies about that stress, is it true that girls feel judged or worried about how they look? 7 in 10 girls believe they're not good enough or don't measure up in some way. 92% would like to change something about the way they look. 70% of girls avoid normal daily activities when they feel bad about their looks. Difference in the African American and Latino communities than it is in white communities. 81% of 10-year-olds are afraid of being fat. And 10 to 20% of college-age women have an eating disorder. In our world that we live in and that your girls live in, there's often a worry about becoming fat. And that it's true. As a nurse, I will tell you, obesity is the absolute #1 health concern of our world, of our country, in terms of health impact. The girls represented by the dads in this room, though, you don't fall into the category of girls at risk. The category your girls are at risk for is that last idea of an eating disorder. Because eating disorder girls come from families that have high expectations, have girls that feel pressure and anxiety and the need for control around how their bodies look, and that idea is way more at risk than your girls being obese adults. It's just obesity and the idea of becoming too fat is a socioeconomic problem in our country, and I just want to make sure that we understand that so that we're not worried while these girls are in this exploring, changing body, that they will gain 55 pounds over a 5-year period of time, 10 to 55 pounds, that we're not evaluating their size in ways that don't fit what their risk really is. And I just want to make sure that we get a chance to really think about courage over what they really look like, because it can be super confusing for girls. Our girls are becoming grown up, and then this idea of being evaluated about whether they look sexy, but not too sexy, whether they look appealing to people and how we feel about whether they look appealing to people, and then all the anxiety about them being too appealing or not appealing enough, or whatever that means to us as grown-ups and as men and as dads, is something to really explore honestly for yourself. There's so many ways that old jokes by a dad, like, I have my shotgun out and the first guy shows up and blah, 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 or those are old. You can just relax and let go of all those old jokes, because our girls need to be seen by the interesting, sexual, truly normal human beings that they are. And I want you to have a chance to explore what might you be afraid of, honestly, and what your girls have to face every day in terms of being kind of evaluated and judged by others in the world.
So that's, of all the old jokes you could come up with, that specific one of sweetie, choose well, because it matters, seems like...
Choose well, that's way different than, I'm going to get my shotgun out with the first boy that shows up at my front door. That feels like 180 degrees away. Choose well is an interesting idea.
Interesting.
That whole joke around, well, first of all, I think just acknowledging that our girls are sexual beings and interesting people with ideas and dreams and thoughts and goals, and that somehow that they're going to be matched up in the world of men who might be dark and dastardly and out to get them. we gotta not only not demean our girls by not being able to pick that idea up, and not demean our boys by creating them as the stark, sinister place they are too. I think part of it is just making sure that we affirm where our girls are and where our boys are too. So choose well means to me, pay attention to the people that you surround yourself in, that become your tribe of people, who you find yourself with, because you know, you become better people by the people you surround yourself with. That's an interesting.
Isn't there like a, sorry, it
Yeah.
feels like there's a bridge between those two things. Because
Yeah.
I think what he's saying is like, the shotgun joke is really around the assumption that boys are bad,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And-
Come home with a loser.
Yeah,
and
Yeah.
it's not
and,
welcome
well, the
there.
assumption that most boys are bad, and what
No,
you're saying
all
is
boys are
choose
bad.
well becomes like
Yeah,
a harder thing if
Yeah.
there's less.
of course. Takes more courage.
Well, it takes more self-confidence that I'm
Takes
worth
more-
somebody better.
Takes more courage. This idea of the sexualization of our girls versus acknowledging that our girls are sexual beings definitely has an impact on how they see themselves and their mental health and their chance of having risky sexual behavior. So for me, we don't want to lose out on the opportunity of engaging with our girls honestly and authentically about real relationships and who they are as people in the world, because that helps keep them healthy. So if we find that our toolbox only holds kind of old ideas, we have to sort of, or, you know, we all fall into communication patterns in a void we've all pulled from our past or old jokes or old ideas. And part of what is interesting about exploring it for ourselves is what really matters to us, what we want for our girls, and what kind of relationships do we want them to have. You know, it's just good and interesting to do and explore.
A current challenge at home is clothing selection.
Yes, let's talk about that.
And it is funny because like the whole fair midriff thing,
Mhm,
crop tops,
Mhm.
super popular right now.
mhm.
Um,
Or just yoga pants generally, or anything.
Right, well, leaving very little to the imagination,
Yeah.
whether it's skin or yoga
Right.
pants, which
Right.
leave little to imagination even though there's no skin present. I mean, is that sexualizing or is that fashion? I mean,
Here's the way I'm gonna just
I wanna push back, but it's like,
I'm gonna suggest that most of the comments we think we need to make don't need to be made. So when it comes to talking about whether we think our daughter's having too many desserts, or whether we think she looks fat, or whether we want to comment on anything she's eating or wearing, I think part of what we need to think about is that there's more interesting things to talk about. And that although it comes from a place of authentic concern, will she be seen as provocative? Will she be seen as sexy? Will she be seen as whatever? Will she be seen or accepted as a fat person or a thin person or whatever person, or a person with zits or a person with greasy hair, a person who doesn't have their deodorant on? I think most of the time, as a dad, the best place to go is somewhere else in your conversation. Because I think that in the world, your daughter is being judged already, and for the most part, it'll be taken care of by other people. When she shows up here, if she's picking her nose and doesn't have deodorant on, it'll happen automatically that the world will cue her in without you warning her before she leaves the room. And sometimes what she's wearing is a trial costume to see how it goes out there in the world. And that generally, if I'm being judged before I leave, I'm confused by that message. I think for the most part, my number one piece of advice for you is when this person walks in with a weird outfit, no deodorant, greasy hair, and pimples, your job is to have your eyes light up. That think acceptance and 100% unconditional love over judgment, worry, evaluation.
To clarifying,
Yes.
on the food, it's around the fact that she gets obnoxious when she has sugar.
Right.
So
Well,
don't eat that, it's got nothing to do with calories.
let me
It has
talk
to do
about
with
food.
impact on the rest of the family.
Here's food. The apple rarely falls far from the tree. So in the end, if you have great food in your house, your daughter will eat great food. If you are people who eat dinner even 2 times a week with your daughter at a table, even if it's just one adult, that is a grounding, interesting, not only communication builder, but a choice around what is healthy eating. I would have great food in my house. I would make sure that my daughter has enough calories, and I wouldn't speak about how much she's eating or how little she's eating unless you are at a point where you think there's a real problem, and then I would just bring in an expert, to be totally honest. So if she's starving herself, please notice, and please bring in, and there are resources that you can get through Betsy and people here, or through myself, that I can send to you if she is not eating. But if she is overeating, you need the same kind of help. But for the most part, people don't learn through our advice so much as they learn by our example. And so part of the work we need to do is to eat well with them. Teach them how to have a great snack. And then watch and observe their behavior. If that looks odd or interesting for me, I would bring up, it seems you can't settle down. I bet, did you have a lot of sugar? That's an interesting observation. But in the end, I would vote to not evaluate or judge that. I would make sure that I, though, was eating well and having great food and packing your lunches together, helping her be her own creator of some of her own destiny around food, I think is another really important idea. Of the 4 things that I would suggest is that making sure that she has enough sleep is a priority for her health. And for somebody in puberty, that really means 9 hours of sleep somewhere in a 24-hour cycle. Sometimes that means short nights and a nap, it really can look different for people. But not only does that refresh who she is, but it allows people to grow well. Most of growth happens while you are sleeping, and growth hormone is released at night when you're sleeping. Well, it is released when you're sleeping, whether it's at night or not. And then if you have to invest in one idea about food because you just need to, this is the time where in puberty, middle school into early high school is the time when you're developing 90% of your adult bone. Adult bone growth happens in puberty. So make sure that your daughter has calcium. That's in the food she eats. It can even be in calcium added into orange juice. It really doesn't matter. But there's no opportunity to reinvest in your bones once puberty is over. This is the time that most bones are built. And if you're going to haul around some bones, you're going to need some muscles, so they're going to need some protein. And lots of girls like to explore the idea of vegetarianism or veganism. So just exploring, what does that mean then to have protein in your diet when you're going to choose to eat in a vegetarian way is perhaps something that might be true in your household. And then I'm a nurse, and I believe strongly that we have to vaccinate our girls. So that's another place that you can be an advocate for your girl.
One more
yeah.
question on the clothing thing. I mean, the other challenge there, and you may have the same advice of no comment, but whether it's me or mom, who, we're the ones paying, and so she shows up with, I want to buy this. I want you to buy this. It's not commenting when she emerges from her bedroom in the morning wearing it to school. It's a question when she emerges at the front of the store with, I want you to buy this.
I think you know what I'm going to say here. I think if you're controlling a wallet, you don't have to buy anything that isn't interesting to you. And you can say when you have your own money, that can be something for you to explore when you are whatever. But part of the work of choosing to buy clothes, wearing clothes, exploring clothes, well, I'll tell you, your girls live in a time where Kim Kardashian shows up on their Instagram feed naked. So they have a full range out here. They show up here in the most conservative the most conservative clothing of any school with girls in this metropolitan area. So that's one end. And Kim Kardashian's on the other end, and most likely, what your girls show up with is somewhere in the middle. So let's not evaluate everything off of what they look like here, or here, and pretty much figure out that they're gonna land up somewhere in here, and that's their work to do that. But you had another question.
Yes, it was about food behavior.
Yeah.
Because my daughter is now begins on the is experimenting actually the vegetarian.
Yeah.
So she doesn't eat enough protein. Of course, we lead by example. I love barbecue. We do it very often.
Yeah.
But the rest of the family eats a lot of meat and stuff. But
Yeah.
she's aware of that.
Yeah.
So leading by example is not working there.
Yeah.
Explaining
Right,
that.
because it's new for you.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, exactly. So explaining that it is important for her to have protein education, understand, but still she's away. Is there any other? We don't force that.
No, but you're talking about protein coming from a meat source, and there are lots of proteins coming from,
Other sources.
and you're gonna have to explore and learn with her.
Mm.
And that'll be really interesting in a way, perhaps, to communicate and build a relationship with her. Let's explore what it means to have protein as a vegetarian. It's new for me too.
Mm.
I can't think of any more interesting thing,
Yeah.
Right?
absolutely.
right? It's like you're gonna learn golf together, when neither one of you have golfed before. It just happens to be around food.
Some research to that.
Yeah, it's a research thing together. I love it. I have just some final ideas here. Hi, welcome, come on in. One is that some dads find it sort of their humor style to joke and use sarcasm. And I will say that once girls get into middle school, that's just, it's less easy for them to hear and understand it. So if that's your go-to space, especially when it comes to physical selves, I would try to rewire my brain to make sure that it sounds different than that. I think girls really just listen to sarcasm and joke as judgment. They don't hear it as, gee, my dad is so hilarious, or he really means X, Y, Z. All I can hear is what I hear that sarcastic thing is saying. And that sharing or creating traditions with our daughters physically is something that I'm going to invite you to consider. And if you already have a tradition that you do, even thinking now that she's this old, is it need to be re-explored or re-examined? This is a picture of my daughter when she was in middle school, and I would say that she fell off the charts in terms of, and it's a little challenging to see in this picture, but she had a very high BMI, body mass index. And she didn't see herself as an athlete at all. This is the tradition that my husband created with my daughter, which is to ride a tandem in Seattle to Portland. And they did that 4 or 5 years in a row, in a single day. And then they got other dads and daughters that they knew on other tandems, so they had a set of 4 tandems. Now my husband is a phenomenal cyclist. This is the one place of things that he felt like he could bring, and he talked her into this idea. Didn't happen every weekend, didn't happen even more than once a year. This is the daughter, though, that began to, because of this tradition, and because of the stories that get told, began to rewire her thinking. This is the daughter that became the D1 athlete, rode for college in Boston. She could lift this building on her back. You would frickin' flip if you saw her today. So who she is as a 7th grader, because of the tradition that she shared with my husband, that's the way we rewire our understanding who we are, and it took a lot of courage to sit on the back of that tandem. So to me, all these ideas kind of come together there. You may not have that same experience, but what is it for you? And is it taking a cooking class together? Is it taking a cooking class together? Or doing something really interesting, fun, even if it's just once. Even if it's just one evening. And then, is that fun, and could we do it again? And then building traditions that create opportunity for conversation, but also create an opportunity to just grow together and become interesting people. I think sometimes as parents, we think our job is to somehow produce a product that is perfect or interesting. It has nothing to do with how our daughter turns out. This job of being a parent, has to do with, first of all, how you might change and grow as a person, and how she will change your life. But also the goal is seriously just being family together. The goal is family. The goal is just being with each other. It isn't that she's gonna go to Harvard. It isn't that she's gonna get an A in history. It really isn't. Or that she is gonna be a D1 athlete. The goal really is to build relationship. So this dad-daughter team went to the top of Rainier this summer. It continues. So I think part of that idea is, what will you build that can sustain over time? It's about relationship. So let's go to emotion, because I think that's another place that sometimes people are looking for ways to engage around or find it a little bit mysterious, or we certainly have scripts around what middle school and high school girls, who they are emotionally. We spend a lot of time in the media and in our own relationships, just like with the shotgun idea and guys. We have a lot of things about moody teenage girls, mood swing teenage girls. I would really like us to rewrite some of those scripts, because that demeans our girls, and it certainly demeans all of the research that says what would make our girls healthy and interesting people is to become tuned in to their emotional selves, to be able to articulate their emotional selves. And it's true for our sons as well. That demeaning our teenagers by kind of rolling our eyes and saying that's just a moody teenager really doesn't step toward the idea of building a relationship with them around their emotional selves. And there's an enormous amount of research that says how important that is. I have written the goal here as self-control. If there was one goal that probably supersedes all other goals, it's this one. That the idea of being able to have self-control about our emotional selves is the primary task of teenage and childhood life. That part of that has to do with the way our brains are built, and helping our daughters understand that. So much amazing work happens here at Forest Ridge around that, and teaching our girls about their brains. So I just want to make sure that we're all up to speed about what that means, so that we can engage with them around that. So our brains develop from the back to the front. So here's your brainstem, helps you breathe, your heart to beat, and your motor and language gets developed as a child, but the very last part of our brain that gets developed is this prefrontal cortex, and that is fully developed in all of you. And in your girls is partially and continuing to grow, and that prefrontal cortex is the self-control of your emotional self. You are very practiced at calling upon this front of your brain when it comes to an emotional feeling that you have, and you rifle through the hard drive here that says, what did I last do when I felt this discouraged, or this disgruntled, or this dismayed, and what could I do now that would fit this moment? Because you have this fully developed. Your girls are continuing their whole life into their early 20s to build up that reservoir of information, but until that's fully wired up, they don't have that material to draw upon. They will always default to their emotional self first. So if your girls were sitting right here next to you, and I told a super sad story, I could get your girls to cry like that. I'm a super good storyteller, and I like making girls cry. So it's like really easy for me. And they will default to that sad place and show their feelings more openly. You, the petrified adult brain that you have, plus being a dad, plus being a man, plus already learning that the only place to cry is on a soccer field or on a basketball court, you're going to say to yourself after hearing my story, that is a really sad story. I feel sad. You have the same feeling. And then that hard drive up here says, but I'm not going to cry in a room with all these other dads. I've done that before. That did not go well for me. In fact, I learned that when I was 8. I just turned that off. So I'm not going to cry now. So how mysterious would it be then to have somebody always crying? Or somebody showing their emotions so openly when you've been wired up to shut that down or show it later. Self-control means pausing before you act on every feeling, right? So it's the idea of pausing. Your girls are still learning that idea. And they're really good at it sometimes. And then mysteriously, by 7th or 8th grade, you know, they do it sometimes, but then they don't other times. And that feels moody or a mood swing. And that feels like they should be in charge of that. Well, they're still learning that. And part of the work here is recognizing how we can be in conversation with our daughters to help them do that work well, recognizing not that their emotions are not an okay thing, but actually that their emotions can be a guiding force. If you're awake to your own emotional space, if you can say it out loud in words, you actually become a much more emotionally competent person than someone who A, holds it into a box and doesn't let it show, or somebody who just emotes all the time, right? So this idea of being emotionally intelligent allows people to go, gosh, I feel so discouraged right now. I need to explore that with the counselor. I need to talk to my teacher. I need to talk to my dad. I need to write in my journal. That's self-control, right? That's learning how to take my emotional space, acknowledging it, and doing something with it. Perhaps anger, which we don't allow a lot of girls to show, perhaps their anger is actually showing them what they're ultimately going to be passionate about the rest of their lives and take on and advocate for forever. Anger and sadness are hard to see in our girls, especially as daughters, and especially as a dad of a daughter. Lots of dads are uncomfortable with anger and sadness from girls. Our job is to actually acknowledge their feeling and to explore the idea of what now. So, I'm just going to go straight to this idea. The most incredible research that's been done on this idea of being emotionally intelligent. Some of the most incredible work has been done here in the city of Seattle with John and Julie Gottman, Gottman. And the Gottman Institute has studied relationships, in particular marriage relationships, for over 40 years. And the Gottmans have asked the question, what makes a great marriage? And after they created a love lab in Portage Bay, perhaps some of you have read his books or gone to their counseling sessions or been a part of their work, but they created an apartment in Portage Bay where they wired up the community space. They invited married couples to come in and just live for 48 hours. And then they watched and listened to their relationships and their conversations and then looked at those mathematically. And they said, hey, what makes a great marriage is when people know themselves to be heard and understood. That there's a way that those couples have learned to communicate that fully acknowledges each other and listens and participates in conversations by leaning in, leaning toward, turning toward each other. So then the Gottmans went out and said, what about kids? What about kids? Who are those kids that are really resilient, interesting people that operate at their capacity in the classroom while simultaneously managing disruptive, social, challenging things on the playground and other places in their life? And they can do both those two things. Who are those kids and how do they get to be that way? Because some of those kids come from really outwardly intact families and some of them come from really disrupted families. And how do they still turn out to be these kids that can manage themselves in a classroom and on a playground or the playground of life in interesting ways, in high capacity ways? So they followed a group of families for 20 years. They did stress tests on the kids and the grown-ups, they tested them, they watched them over time, and they asked the question, who are those kids and how did they get that way? And guess what? It was the same answer. Kids who can manage themselves in the classroom in socially challenging ways, know themselves, stand on the firm foundation that they are heard and understood in their homes. So the Gottmans have spent the rest of their career teaching couples and families how to do that work. And I'm going to teach you. And it falls on these principles. First, that it is super hard to come up with an action plan to a problem until I have had my feeling acknowledged. If I'm upset and crying and carrying on, if I'm slamming a door and kicking the dog, if I'm just raging around, if I'm sullen and silent, whatever, I cannot move on to be an effective planner, organizer, and problem solver until that feeling has been acknowledged by myself and by the people around me. So part of the work that we get to do as grown-ups in our girls' lives is to do that work. So if your daughter jumps into the car after a piano lesson or on a soccer field and slams the door and says, "I'm quitting," part of our normal response, our practice normal response as a grown-up in this situation is one of two things. First, I'm uncomfortable with all this anger and frustration, and I'm sorry, but the Metzgers, we don't quit. Here's a cookie, put a smile on it, whatever. Another one is to jump out, talk to the coach, the piano teacher, get on the phone, whatever, try to problem solve it. Jump straight into what happened, what's going on, how can I help, problem solving. When actually, the Gottmans would invite you to consider the idea of just allowing this emotional space to be acknowledged.
I see that you're really angry.
How about just saying, rough? That sounds rough. And then just settling in. I know that you can put yourself back into the place of your daughter jumping into a car and saying to a parent, to a teacher, to somebody, "I hate it, it's terrible, don't take me there, I don't want to go, blah, 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 blah," but you're really not looking for someone to solve it for you. You're really just looking for an opportunity to just vent this thing. You have really high capacity people in your life, your kids. They got it. Sometimes we just need to come from this place. If I could just picture this place that I come from in this moment when I'm at my best, which says, "You're an amazing, capable, interesting person. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have in mind for that," right? Instead of this idea of, "I've got 6 ideas on how you can make that better." Because when you say, "I have 6 ideas on how you want to make that better," or "let me jump in to help you problem solve around that," we're essentially saying, you don't have that capacity. Take it from me. I know what to do, right? And part of the work here is your brain is already developed. You got the answers. The goal here right now is not your brain. You got it. And in fact, you're protective, sincerely interested in helping her not feel sad or mad is authentic. But it's not helpful to her. So part of the work here is for you to have the opportunity to say, that would be rough. Sounds rough. Sounds hard. You look mad. Make it an observation instead of a question, and right away you get into more of an acknowledgement. Once you ask a question, you're moving into a problem-solving thing. Tell me more. Tell me more. I'm looking forward to hearing more when you're ready. And honestly, sometimes people don't even want to do that when they're so mad, sad, right? When you're ready, I'd like to hear more. Sounds hard. Just that invitation alone is a conversation starter. But once we start moving into fixing it, it all changes up. And the power gets shifted back to you. Let's leave the power over here and acknowledging. Second, girls that can come up with their own action plan, girls that can come up with their own action plan are building those skills. Oh, yeah.
How about in that case, anger can be very destructive,
Yes.
right? So how about just acknowledging the feeling and guiding a little bit into, we don't make decisions when we feel like this.
Or you can, well, that's assuming that she's saying, so if she were to say,
She wants to quit.
I'm quitting,
Yeah.
you can say, gosh, that really sounds rough. Well, you know, she's not gonna quit in that moment. If she said, I quit, I already told my teacher or coach I'm out of here, I could see saying that. She can say, hey, let's explore that some more. Sometimes when we're really hot like you're feeling right now, it's hard to make a decision that's really useful, interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing more. But if she says, I'm going to quit, or that's an implication, you've got time.
Or like, I'm getting out of the car right now, I'm
Yeah, well then that's different, but most girls are not doing that.
No.
They're walking in mad,
Mhm.
right?
Because at that moment, they're caged in the car.
Right,
They
but let's say
can't-
they-
and they really can't react the way they want to.
Right. And part of the idea here is, it's helpful to remind them to calm our bodies now before you're even interested in talking more about it, because you're recognizing that they feel really hot right now, and that's not a great time to
Correct.
problem solve. So I even think self-control means saying something like this. I'm looking forward to hearing more. When your voice sounds like mine, I know you'll be ready. Which is what you're saying. Helping them recognize that having their bodies feel more peaceful, that trying to problem solve right now is not so helpful. Excellent. So this idea that then when they're ready to come up with a problem solving thing, not just throwing out your 12 ideas, but allowing them to explore, also gives this communication of, I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have. And girls who are effective decision makers, they get really good at being able to predict the consequence. Sometimes for you, that's a great coaching moment for you to be able to say, gosh, I'd be nervous about doing that. That seems, I'm nervous for the other girl, or I'm nervous for whatever, right? You're not exactly solving it, because sometimes some of the best work that's changed in your brains has come from a mistake you've made, right? So it didn't necessarily help that your dad told you not to do it. What was helpful is you actually did it, and it didn't go well for you. So protecting our daughter from a negative consequence isn't the goal here either. Outside of personal harm, it's great to go out there and try something and have it fail. We don't do enough of that. We don't do enough of allowing our kids to fail. Now again, not personal harm or not personal harm to somebody else. But outside of that, this idea of, doing your homework after 9 p.m. at night, it's not so helpful. But you don't have to, you can let her figure that out too, right? I'm just saying some things are not harming you as a person. So, just to recap, part of the work is just simply to acknowledge a feeling, allowing and inviting their bodies to calm before even exploring what an action means. And you can communicate that by your own example too. And in your own life, when you come home or you get angry or you get sad or you get discouraged, part of the work is even saying that out loud. I got to think that over, or go take a run before I make a choice around that, or I need to walk around the block 60 times, whatever that is. Even your own example is a great way to communicate that. Is there any other questions around this idea of emotional control?
How good will be or is in acknowledging a situation, right, which most likely is caused by a problem.
Mm-hmm.
However, something that I have been trying to do with my daughter, sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, is what do you propose to fix it?
Mm-hmm.
What's your solution?
Mm-hmm.
So I do understand you have an issue.
Mm-hmm.
How you are planning to fix it?
So sometimes what doesn't work is her readiness to solve it, and you're jumping ahead ready to solve it, and she's not quite ready to do that. Part of it might be that it actually does help, but she's just doesn't have the answer yet. Just because she can't say something right back doesn't mean that it's not working. What you're saying, I think maybe you need another sentence in between, which is, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have in mind. Meaning, it may not be this moment. You may not have a response for me right now. I think sometimes we get in work situations where when we ask a colleague, what do you have in mind for that? We get an answer right back because you're kind of in the zone of that. When we say to our daughter, hey, what do you have in mind for that? It's sort of a performance question. What if you said, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have in mind for that. Let's get back together after dinner. Or I'll be out in the garage. I'd love to hear when you're ready. I think sometimes too, in the world of our kids, when our kids are 2, the time between hoping to hear what you have or calming your body or whatever, we need to get back to them within 2 minutes. But when our kids get older, we actually have more time. Saying to them, let's get back tomorrow. Let's get back after dinner. When you're ready or after you have a chance to think about it, because I think sometimes they don't know yet. So because it's not a failure if you can't hear a response, she just may not know it yet.
So it would be good for me to pursue that conversation later,
Or just say to her, I look forward to hearing what you think you're gonna do. You're, again, coming from this place, you're an amazing, capable, interesting person. I am looking forward to hearing, not saying all these words, but coming from that place.
Right.
You're an amazing, capable person. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have in mind for that. That comes from a place of, you've got this. I got your back too. That's gonna be fun to hear. Versus kind of a performance question, which is, what do you have in mind then? Come up with an answer now. And she might feel overwhelmed by that, by saying, I'm already flooded with emotion. And now you're asking me right now to come up with an answer? I don't know. That's why I'm feeling like this, flooded. You, the dad, might think, you know what, I'm ready to move on now on the list of getting this done. But you're not ready. Because you're communicating here like, I've got 6 ideas in my mind. Let's see if you can come up with some of those. That's another thing sometimes girls are like, I don't know what you want me to say here.
That would happen.
Yeah. And girls want to please you. So if you're making them try to guess what you want them to do, that's not really them coming up with an idea. That's a performance guess question. Like, I got 6 ideas, try to guess what's on my mind is kind of that idea, right? So part of it is saying, honestly and authentically, wow, that'll be rough. I'm looking forward to seeing what you're gonna do.
So, this is all though wrapped around things that could be solved with an action plan, right?
Maybe
and
there's
that's not always the case.
truth. So maybe you just do number 1. And self-control simply means learning how to acknowledge my anger and bringing my body back down to a place where I can even talk about something else right now. So truth to that. Truth. Every decision that we make has an emotional component to it. Every single one. You've probably gotten super practiced at not even at flashing right past that emotional space because you already know your next space. She's still back in the default place of, wow, I didn't even know I'm so discouraged and dismayed and mad. I don't even know what it is that I'm about. And your job is to say, you seem so dismayed. I can see that in you. I'm interested and invested in you in that space. It seems like you still need to cry about that. I look forward to hearing from you when your voice sounds like mine, right? That's control. You're right on that. She may not even know what she's mad about. True.
Yeah, I'm actually more talking about things that she does know, like sibling issues.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So like that's not a solvable situation. Like,
Or it's not
right?
100% solvable. But solving for her may be how to manage my emotion in that space. That is solvable enough, right? Truth to that. It's not going to go away, but I can become more effective in managing my emotions. That's interesting. Anybody else?
Well, I think sometimes you need to teach them to let it go rather than ruminating about something that may not be a significant issue.
So in communicating that, let's talk about how you would communicate that. I'm sobbing because of something that feels not worthy of my sobbing to you.
Right, so, well, some perceived slight that, why is it that no one wants to be my friend and so on, and well, if you stopped ruminating about that all the time, maybe you could be out there and be a friend.
Okay,
But-
so
but
let,
but it's more about letting it go, rather than, you really don't wanna always be thinking, why do I not have friends?
when I communicate to my daughter that this is a small problem in the schema of life, in other words, you're greatly worried, yet you have a great house over your head, you have a strong meal here, you have a great family, you'll get past this. There's something diminishing about that in terms of the truth for her. As a nurse, when somebody says, I have pain, it's not my job to say, well, actually, the kid next to you in that bed, he just had his leg cut off. He's got real pain. Your pain doesn't actually exist, or it's not as big as his pain. Therefore, I'm going to give him all the pain medicine. This pain is still real. This experience is still real. And when I default to the place that I feel sad, it's 100% for me. I don't have the perspective at the age of 11 or 13 or 12 or 9 or 15 even to be able to go, sure, when I'm 60, I'll have some friends. I don't care about that.
So that was a poor example, but my point is that you don't want, I don't think you want to put the pressure on them of come up with an action plan to solve this, we'll get back to you on it later, when it really is just, I felt like that person was mean to me, you know. And I don't know, and maybe the question is, when is it something that they should let go, and when is it something that you should encourage them to think about solving?
Letting go is its own action plan. Therefore, step back one step beyond that and just, like siblings, say, that is rough. It doesn't feel good when you're excluded.
And later, when they're out of reptilian brain, it's like, so, you thought any more about it? And it's just, yeah, I don't care that much.
Saying to somebody to let something go is an action plan. Therefore, this idea of letting go is no action plan is actually not true. So inviting someone to let it go is creating a solvable thing as if it's small idea, that it isn't in perspective with other pain. Therefore, to me, go back one step. All that needs to be done here is saying, it hurts when someone is mean to you.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is that my daughter tends to ruminate about things, and in a way that sometimes isn't particularly healthy.
Right,
And she's always down because, oh, she's remembering what happened last week or
Right.
2 weeks ago. And,
right. That's not very fun.
and I'm not sure that it's something. I mean, if it's a significant issue, yes, but if it's just a perceived issue, then it's more about working on the perception rather than I'm truly trying to solve a problem that doesn't really exist. Yes, I'm judging for her, it doesn't exist, but yes.
As a brand new 60-year-old, I can say with 100% assurance that half of what gets said to me over my lifetime with my kids, I don't even get. It seems ridiculous. In the same way that a 2-year-old who ran up and cried because their toy was smashed, you're like, we got 1 billion toys here. That still doesn't mean that it's not significant in this moment about that toy, even if there's an ocean of toys in front of you. It's ridiculous. And yet, what is important here is that the sadness about that toy is still real. Part of the work of being depressed or anxious about something continuing on over time is a whole other thing of saying, I can see that your sadness continues over time. And that's important and interesting. Perhaps we need to create other places for you to not feel that way, or to have to talk to somebody so that you don't feel that way. But it is still real, and me not saying, trying to always put it into perspective with other pain is, I'm just worried about that.
Yeah, no, my point was that
Yeah.
you shouldn't always try to solve things, some things.
Oh, I agree with that.
You don't want that pressure of, what are you gonna do about it?
I 100% agree about that. It's acknowledging it, simply acknowledging. All right,
can I talk about, I want to acknowledge your time, but I want to talk about when there's conflict, respect, and criticism. Because I think another kind of hard place to be is there's one thing if our daughter's sad or discouraged on their own life, but then when we feel tension or argument or whatever with ourselves or with another parent or another grown-up, your mother or whoever that our daughter comes up against, I think part of the work here, that there's several kind of interesting ideas to explore. One, that parents who are warm yet firm and emphasize the reasons for rules, that those girls consistently take fewer risks than authoritarian parents. So sometimes in the world of conflict, the easiest place to go to as a parent, and in particular a dad, is because we've learned those roles, and then testosterone is a huge fight or flight hormone. So when confronted with conflict, it can be easy to think, what I need to do is to squash that down or to flee. I'm out of here. And neither one of those are particularly effective in conflict, especially with a girl. Especially with a girl. But I would say with boys as well. That authoritarian my way or the highway, in a place of safety, sure. But in regular day-to-day life, part of what is more interesting and more challenging to explore as a dad is to not go to a place of saying, I need to karate chop this person into place so that they will comply with what I need to have happen. And some of us were raised in families like that, so it's like our first go-to thing. I know that for myself. And part of us come from laissez-faire families where there were no rules, so we don't really know what to come with either. So part of the work is finding this middle balance that says, I'm invested and interested in this, yet when I see conflict or when you come at me or when it's not going well, what happens for both of us? When I'm a rower, and when we come through the Montlake Cut, there are 2 walls on that Montlake Cut that were man-made, right? Before the Montlake Cut, well, first of all, they had to dig something, and then there were beaches there. And when we bring an 8 down through that cut, because of those walls, we create a wake, and then it wakes out on the other side, and wake, and wake, and wake, and then a launch comes through, and another 8, and now you're sitting in this thing. That's like conflict. Once you have 2 people, your 2 walls like this, the Gottmans would say to you, only a conflict of any significance, really over a minute and a half, there's no win for anyone. So if you find yourself regularly in conflict, or in a place where it's not going well, one of the things to think about is, what is my job now here, and how can I create this? Because if I hold firm to that wall, nothing is going to get solved here. Yet, I have this instinct about myself that if I beach out, somehow I let down my authority, or let down my idea, or let down my anything. But what could we do that would be more interesting in that conflict, and what does it communicate about our daughters? So I'm going to suggest that in the height of moment and of a high emotional trigger for yourself and for your daughter, that you need to acknowledge that space and take a chance to step away and come back. And that can be really hard when you want your point to be made. Part of the work of girls in interpreting anger and concern, especially from an authoritarian figure in their life, whether it's a coach or a dad in particular, when girls are on a soccer team, if the coach says, the footwork sucks, a classic girl response in a group like that will be, in their minds, the coach hates me. If you are standing as a guy, if you have a bunch of guys on the field and the coach says, the footwork sucks, the classic guy thing to say is, yeah, the footwork sucks, but he's not talking to me. It's a different space to think of. The girl thing is, I am looking for approval from this person. And when they come at me with a judgment like that, they don't like me, nor do they accept me. And conflict is one of those things that is inevitable in a family, because you have different interesting ideas coming at you, and part of the work is thinking, when I'm confronted with conflict, got created somehow, magically is happening right now in front of me, what's my job here? And part of the work is to recognize that if it's going on longer than a minute and a half, you need to say, I'm triggered, I'm not sure this is gonna go anywhere here. I'd like to make a commitment with you to come back after dinner, tomorrow, in an hour, 20 minutes. Let's see if we can both bring our bodies down, because you're not only role modeling there that yourself is triggered, but that your daughter is flooded as well, and that could be an opportunity to come back. Yes.
What do you do when you do try to disengage, cooler heads?
Yes, and she's
But she
right
still
out.
wants
Dad,
to-
dad,
Yeah,
dad,
it's like,
dad,
what do you
dad.
do, that?
I think you said, gotta
Yeah.
walk the dog 50, 60 times around the block, and I need some space. Yeah. It will be healthy for both of us, and and you could even say, it's an effective communication technique for us to come to resolution if we take a break and come back, because I want to hear more, but I can't hear more from you right now. I think that's interesting.
Can you, so all that, everything you've talked about makes sense. The word that's throwing me on this slide honestly is risk.
Mm.
Because, like, for me, I want my daughters to take risks.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes,
so,
okay, this is high risk
like,
behavior.
irresponsible risks? is
Yes,
what
like
you're referring to? No,
drinking
okay.
to excess, smoking
Okay.
cigarettes, getting involved in high-risk behavior that right,
Okay.
great, great.
Yeah.
And absolutely, there's this balance of healthy risk that says, I'm gonna explore growth mindset and
Right.
still fail.
Yeah.
And the other risk is, I'm going to experiment to the point of excess. And the reason why an authoritarian parent is more at risk for creating that in
No,
a kid
that makes sense. I just.
is
like,
this though, because you're only listening to the loudest voice.
Right.
So when somebody in your crowd says, let's go do this, and they're the loudest voice, you're like, oh, I'm in on that.
Right.
I only listen to the loudest voice. Yes,
Okay.
excellent. So I think we've already said this. So I just want to acknowledge then that part of the work in conflict is to make sure that we have an opportunity to recognize some of our own triggers. We want to make sure that we also don't get caught up in this idea of keeping circling around the same thing, and rebooting. And part of it is also communicating this idea of there's room for disagreement in our family. And in every healthy family, though, some of the decisions belong just to the grown-ups. And in every healthy family, some of the decisions belong just to the kids. And in every healthy family, some of the decisions are shared. As our girls get older, and older, when they're little, you're making 100% of their decisions. And as they get older, more and more decisions are shared, right? And then more and more decisions become their own. The definition of an adult is making your own decisions. So helping and imagining ourselves growing along with our girls, we're going to share more decisions, and then a mistake will happen for sure. And then you're going to reevaluate and then, bring it out and bring it in and bring it out, because in the end, what you want is someone who goes, I have the capacity to make my own decisions. I learned that in my own home. Because we shared decisions that were difficult. We shared in conflict. We shared when it didn't go. Because we're always growing as people, and lots of times we will default to safety for our girls. It doesn't allow them to, they're asking for more of this or more trust or more opportunity or more whatever. And we're like, I'm not so sure. I got to be brought along and see how that's going to work over time. And conflict happens in that navigation and exploration all the time. That would be a healthy family. For her to push into it. This book, Untangled, if you were to read one book about a girl, it's this book right here, Untangled. Betsy says yes. I cannot say enough about this book. And one of the things she talks about here is the idea that as your girls are in middle school, one of the things that is happening is that they're leaving you as a family and beginning to explore who their own tribe is. And she uses the metaphor of swimming. And she says, picture your daughter out there swimming, staying above water, spending all this energy, trying to be accepted, trying to have a friend, trying to do whatever. Then they come into you, the wall of the swimming pool, hold on for a little bit, and then they push off the wall, conflict, push off the wall to get back out into the swimming pool. That's an interesting idea. First, all the energy it takes to be out here swimming. I'm going to fall down, and it's not going to work, I'm going to feel anxious, I'm going to feel sad, I'm going to come back into the wall, I need to feel safety, security, acceptance. Then I'm going to push myself away from that wall to go back out to my tribe until I can be out here and swim on my own. That is like a genius metaphor for this space in your girls' lives. You're the wall of the swimming pool. It's not gonna get so comfortable. It's gonna be fun when they start swimming back towards you. You're gonna go, yay, that, and then they're gonna push off. It feels uncomfortable and not fun. And sometimes that happens in conflict. It's the only way they know how to push off sometimes. So I think part of our work is to think, how can I create safety and acceptance and assurance to be the wall that they can count on so that they can go out there and try to swim on their own? That's interesting. That's interesting. So one of my mentors says all the time, are we creating the road for our children or the children for the road? In other words, are we out there trying to maneuver this road out there, solving their problems, creating the detour signs, moving the rocks away, making it perfect for them so they don't feel sad or discouraged or not take risks? Or are we inviting this really interesting, difficult road in front of them and thinking, hey, I'm right here. And I think seeing yourself as a dad that partners with your daughter on this journey, that allows the interesting rocks to come up, that allows for dangerous intersections, for them to have to make a choice that may or may not work out for them, that's being a safe wall because you're kind of exploring it along with them, and that builds relationship. That builds interesting conversations. That shows your comfort with the difficulty of the journey, as well as their difficulty managing the journey. And I think that creates and builds relationship over time. And for me, that's communication. That's saying, I'm in on this whole thing, rocks and all. And mistakes. When you fall down on this journey, that's a good thing. You're learning. I think a place of success, or what I imagine, is that when your girls head off to college and they're standing there at some major intersection and they see some large boulder in the road, they're going to say, I've been here before. I know this space. I've done this before. Self-esteem does not come from a compliment or a trophy or a blue ribbon. Self-esteem comes from overcoming an obstacle. So anytime we can partner with our daughters as they overcome the obstacles of friendships and grades and soccer games and piano recitals, we are partnered with them in building relationship. I'm gonna leave it at that. Anybody want to throw out any last idea?
The question about risk-taking.
Yes.
Which, I guess I'm in a similar spot with my daughter who, I don't want to audition for the play. I don't want to try out for the select team. And it's like, and actually I did use some sarcasm, perhaps subtle, but it was absolutely, because if you don't try, you can't fail.
Mm-hmm.
And you tried out for the ultimate team and made it. But
And Betsy and the Forest Ridge team have done so much great work here on Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset and fixed mindset, which is exactly this. And for anybody that just needs to remember what that means, Carol Dweck is a researcher out of the Stanford, and she asked the question, how come kids take on a challenge, take a risk, or don't take a risk? And she put out hard puzzles for kids to solve. And there are some kids that did hard puzzles and would succeed at the hard puzzle. And then when they were done with those hard puzzles, they would bring in harder puzzles, next level up. Fixed mindset kids who struggled with the next level of hard puzzles would go, I don't like it when I can't figure it out. Bring me back to the puzzles that I can do well and get 100%. And the growth mindset kids got to the next level of puzzles and said, I love hard puzzles. Could you give my dad the name of this hard puzzle company? I love it when I can't figure it out. The genius of Carol Dweck's work is both seeing and recognizing that as two different responses, but most excitedly, seeing that any fixed mindset person can become a growth mindset person. It's not a forever part of your personality to be a fixed mindset person. Some of what we can do as parents and as teachers is to encourage the idea of risk, and that the performance of finishing the puzzle is not what gets recognized and rewarded. The trying, the effort, and the energy, and the pursuit of the challenge is what gets rewarded in a growth mindset person. And if you are interested, she of course has a book as well, but I like her TED Talk as much as the book. And I think she has 2 TED Talks, Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K, and I think they're really helpful, interesting, because it's learning how paying for an A, or making a point of saying, wow, you're so smart, you got an A, and that becomes sort of our focus of conversation with our daughters around being smart and getting an A. That is very different kind of reward, because then she says, I can only get that attention from my dad if that puzzle is perfect. What would happen, or what kind of attention would I get from my dad if I am unable to complete the puzzle? And so that helps us think, what is the goal here? The goal here is to have the imperfect but effort toward solving a problem with risk. I will say that unhealthy risk, that when you look across the nation, not necessarily to your girls, because population demographics, high risk behavior, having sex, smoking, drugs, any of that, doubles between your sophomore and your junior year across the nation. So part of that is this idea of pushing hard against the swimming pool wall and saying, I got this. I know what to do. And if you're looking at creating people who delay that space, the #1 characteristic of kids who delay the exploration of higher risk behavior is that they are in strong relationship with their grown-ups.
So is delaying that behavior a good thing?
You always want to delay behavior till the kids have a brain. No one benefits from being a teenage drinker. If you don't drink alcohol to a significant level until you're in your 20s, the chances of you being an adult problem drinker are statistically 0. If you don't smoke a cigarette until you're in your late teens or 20s, the chances of you becoming an adult smoker, habitual adult smoker, are statistically 0. And nobody benefits from being sexually active in a major way, putting yourself at risk, having sex with unplanned partners. I mean, unplanned sexual behavior, nobody benefits from that as a teenager. Planned sexual behavior in relationships thought through, that's different. But unplanned sexual behavior, nobody benefits from as a teenager. So if you're looking for somebody who delays any sort of high-risk health-related behavior, the #1 thing you can do is build your relationship with your daughter. Hands down, and your son. So, thank you, Betsy. Thank you, dads. Thank you for being here. Thank you, video people. Thank you, moms, for registering your dads. Yes, thanks very much. Thank you for coming, guys.